Good morning again. This morning's scripture comes to us from the book of Exodus, the 20th chapter, verse 17, followed by Luke's gospel, the 12th chapter, verses 31 through 34. Feel free to follow along on the screens if you would like. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Got an email notice that my high school class is getting ready to have a 50th reunion. You don't need to do the math. Reunions are a time when I think about the 10th commandment because usually the first thought I have when I consider getting back together with people, many of whom I haven't seen for many years, who knew me in another time and another place when I was a different person, and I knew them in another time and another place when they were different people, my first thought is, what are they going to think about me? Which is, after all, one of the significant bases of this commandment. We've come to the 10th one. It's the last of those original 10. You should probably be glad that we did not do the Mishnah and the Talmud with all the commentaries on these things and every single thing that was in that law, that teaching of God when Jesus came, because it would be a 613 Sunday sermon series. It's only job security for the preacher, believe me, in that case. So we've come to a time that's a pretty good time as far as my own experience is, because I figure that there will be some people who will show up at that gathering with cars they have rented for the occasion. And there may be some people who actually show up in clothes that they have rented for the occasion. Because it's really important for all of us. How people see us, how we experience ourselves, how we feel about us is very often pretty significantly dependent on things like what we wear and how we get there, and therefore the perception of us as the kind of people that we are, at least when you look at us, when you experience us in that way. Now, this is one of the commandments that has changed in its meaning from that time to this. And it's changed because the world has changed. Ordinarily, the people who try to read this very strictly get a little confused because you're not supposed to covet your neighbor's wife. Didn't we already have a commandment about that? That was about 3 weeks ago when we said, do not commit adultery. You're not supposed to covet the people in the family or the community that work there. Doesn't that also get covered by not taking them away? But in fact, this commandment comes from a time when, and I admit it's changed now, when the patriarch was the head of the family or the head of the community, and if you were that person, your wife belonged to you, and your slaves belong to you, and your oxen belong to you, and your house belonged to you. It was all about property. This is a property commandment. It has much more in common with the 8th commandment than it does with the 7th commandment, because this commandment is about stuff. Don't look at other people's stuff. Don't think you deserve to have stuff like other people. And the end result of all that is you need to come to terms with what you have and who you are and what your place is in the community to which you belong. Now, admittedly, this is a little bit different from the way a lot of us think about this. When I say it's all about stuff, that's what I'm talking about. And in the world that we live in today, a whole lot of the things that we encounter, a whole lot of the things we learn, a whole lot of the ways people relate to us, a lot of the things that happen when we turn on the computer or the cell phone or the tablet or any of those things has to do with stuff. You know, we're nervous that the government knows about our phone calls. We're worried that the government knows about our email messages. Let me tell you, there's a lot bigger business keeping track of what we are interested in, what we look at, what we like. Because every time I open a website that has advertising, it has advertising that is directed at me. Why? Because the people who put the advertising there have been watching what I look at, what I think about, what I click. They don't have a very good opinion of me unless, now there is somebody else at our house who uses some of the same websites. And I think maybe what they're showing me is what she's interested in. I'm not sure about that, but that's certainly a possibility. It's all about stuff. That's what so much of this is about, and that's what the 10th commandment is about. Stuff. We enjoy musical theater. And a number of years ago, we saw a show based on a movie about con men, and it was called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. You remember Dirty Rotten Scoundrels? And Catco just put it on last month. We were vacationing at that point, and I didn't get to see it performed here, but we saw it, and it was John Lithgow and Norbert Leo Butz were the leads in the thing. And the story is about these two guys who go to the French Riviera, and they decide that they are going to swindle people. Actually, they meet after they get there. And one of them has been doing it in this kind of setting for a long time, has been getting things from people by false pretenses. His name is Lawrence, and he is suave, and he is urbane, and he knows how to fit in, and he's really good at that. And the other character is a younger man. His name is Freddie, and Freddie has no class. Freddie has no couth. Freddie sticks out in every kind of setting in this place with these cultured people that they are trying to swindle. And so the older man takes the younger man into his confidence, literally, and tries to help him along. There is a fabulous singing, dancing production number in this show called Great Big Stuff. And Freddie sings it. And Freddie dances it. And everybody in the cast sings it and dances it. And it is about the fact that he believes that he deserves anything that he can get his hands on. Anything that he can swindle people out of. Anything that he can get from other people by false pretenses or not, he deserves it. It all ought to belong to him. And he sings about all these things. Now, I started out thinking, well, I'll get the lyrics, and I'll quote you some of the lyrics. But Freddie is a pretty crass character. And I could never do more than 3 lines. We get to the 4th line of the song, and there's a word there that I probably shouldn't say in this setting. So you'll have to look it up if you want to see the particulars about this. But the point I take is, Freddie is a guy who believes that the more he's got, the better. And that's exactly the opposite of the 10th commandment. But it's a way of life in our world. About 40 years ago, I guess I am ready for my 50th high school reunion because I'm quoting stuff that happened 40 years ago. There's a man named John Berger who was a professor from England, and he was a philosophy teacher, and he did a little series of shows on the BBC called Ways of Seeing that published a comparable book at the same time. And Berger was talking about publicity. And while his language is pretty dense for us, I think I can pick out a story there that will help us understand why we are being warned against being covetous. This is an example. Women, since you used to be property, this is an example for you. I will get to the guys later on. Let's suppose that there is a woman who is in a shopping mall, and she is walking past the windows of stores where clothing is sold. And in one of the windows there is a mannequin wearing a beautiful dress. The lighting is superb, the cut and the style are gorgeous. She looks at that, and she also looks at its price and thinks, boy, it would really be a stretch to buy that, but I think I could. Berger says what she does when she looks at this is she compares the person that she is now, dressed as she is to go shopping, wearing the clothes that she already owns, and she looks at this window, at this display, at this dress, and she begins to think what her life would be like sometime in the future when she owns that dress. Yes, it's been expensive. Yes, it's been hard to do it. Yes, she had to probably give up some other things to have that. But when she has that dress, she will become the person that she imagines when she looks at the dress on display. And then what she does is she compares that future person to the person who is standing right in front of the window right now. And Berger says the person who is standing in front of the window right now doesn't measure up. Not the way she would look if she were wearing that. Not the person she would be if she were wearing that. Berger says if she goes inside the store, and even though it's difficult, she buys that clothing, what she has done is bought back her self-respect for the price of the dress. Now, folks, that happens to us continually, doesn't it? Don't you see advertising that says to you, pretty much says to you, if you had this, you'd be a better person. If you had this, people would look up to you. If you wore this, they would like you more. They would think of you as a better person. What on earth am I going to drive to my 50th high school reunion that will make people think I've had a good life? I probably don't own it yet. I may have to rent a car. What am I going to wear to my 50th high school reunion that will let people know that I am a person of substance and significance? Well, that's at the heart of coveting. It's not just looking across to the next tent encampment and saying, gosh, they got nice things over there. I wish I had that stuff. It's not just a matter of looking across to the next driveway or to somebody else's closet and saying, boy, they got nice things. I wish I had that stuff. It is what we do to ourselves on a regular basis, living as we do in a consumerism-saturated world where so much of the point is stuff. Now, men, I have not forgotten you. Nick Kristof, who writes for the Times, New York Times, wrote in a column, I don't know, a month ago, maybe two, wrote that, he said, the 85 wealthiest people in the United States, 85 people, have more assets than the lower 50% of the people in the United States, ranked economically. 85 people, more assets than these folks. But he says in a following column, when you are that rich, it may not make a difference anymore. You can get to a point where there's no advantage in being really, really well off. He said the successful sales manager buys himself a Porsche, parks it in his driveway where his neighbors can see. And the CEO in the next house buys himself a Ferrari and parks it in the driveway where the neighbors can see. He calls these positional goods. And he said, that's not enough. The hedge fund manager at the end of the block has a Lamborghini in his driveway. There comes a point where having more isn't enough. There comes a point, in fact, and we're close to the tipping point of that in our culture, when having anything is not enough. There's always something bigger, there's always something better, there's always something more exciting, there's always something more dramatic that you could have, that you could look forward to. This came to me particularly a few years ago, and I was reading an article about what does it mean to have enough. And one of the things this article talked about was shoes. How many pairs of shoes do you have? And I thought about the shoes I had. Well, I don't have very many pairs of shoes, except I started looking for and then enumerating them. Well, I had shoes for mowing the lawn, and I had shoes for dressing up, several colors of shoes for dressing up, so that they matched the clothing that I wore. And I had shoes for water sports, and I had shoes for athletic activities. And by the time I got done with that, I was just amazed at how many different pairs of shoes I had. And then the writer said, "So how many pairs can you wear at a time?" Yeah. Today, I have fewer shoes. And that is based on understanding that there's a limit to what stuff will do for us. You know, the passage we heard from Luke, Luke puts this piece about look at what God has given you. God has been generous with you. You can trust God. And so you can seek his kingdom instead of going after stuff. That's the point. But Luke puts this not in the middle of a series of sayings that Jesus had, which is what Matthew does. That's just one part of the Sermon on the Mount. Luke starts out this section with a story about a farmer who is particularly well-to-do. You remember that story? He had a great harvest. He had a fabulous harvest. He had such a wonderful harvest that he didn't have room to store the crop. So what did he do? Did he choose to share it with his neighbors? Did he choose to help out other people who maybe had their harvest fail and do better than they did to help him out? Did he choose to do anything at all with that? No, he didn't. He used what he had gotten to help him remove his smaller storage spaces and build bigger ones. And you remember the end of that story? He looks around and he says, "Hey, I'm set for as long as I can imagine. I'm all taken care of. I got everything I need. Life is going to be good from now." And God that night says to him, "You overlooked something. You're not the person who determines how long you're going to live. You may have all kinds of stuff, but it's not going to mean anything when you come to the end of your life." Puts the question in a different way, doesn't it? When I think about how much more impressive I would be if I drove a better car, if I wore a better cut of clothes, if I had more money, if I could go to better places, if I could be seen with other kinds of people, all of that goes against what the commandments begin with. I mean, how many bathrooms do you need? I saw a little article about somebody who is a very well-to-do, actor, actress, famous person, who is selling a house. The house has 11 bathrooms. I got a bathroom for Monday morning. I got a bathroom for Tuesday morning. I got a bathroom for Wednesday afternoon. Yeah, I can't quite make it all the way around the week. I have to use the same one twice on Saturday. But here we are. Thou shalt not covet. Tradition tells us that since Moses brought down tablets from the mountain, there must have been 2. And there are 10 commandments, and so again, the tradition says that there were 5 commandments on one and 5 commandments on the other. Starts with 1, goes through 10. 1's at the top of this one, 10's at the bottom of this one. You know where 10 leads us? Leads us right back to 1. Why? Because in the first commandment God says, no other gods before me. You shall worship no one but me. Because I'm the God who brought you out of slavery. I'm the God who set you free. I'm the God who will lead you through the wilderness. I'm the God who will put you in a land that I have promised you that will be your own. I'm the God who has given you your life. I'm the God who has given you this world. I am the God who has given you this universe and all the opportunities in it. Worship only me. And the 10th commandment reminds us, if we are going to worship only this God who has given us our lives and who has given us our freedom and who gives us hope and makes it possible for us to live as God's people, then we can't worship stuff. Come to 10, go back to 1. And what that leads me to remember is that what God gives me needs to be enough. And whenever I begin to look and imagine that I will be a better person because I have more things, that I will be a better human being because I have different things, that I will somehow improve myself by surrounding myself with better stuff, that I need to back up and instead of being greedy, have some gratitude for what God has given me. Martin Seligman, who created positive psychology, says that one of the best things you can do for your psychic and mental health is every day make a list of things that went well. He calls it the what went well list. And he started out by saying 3 things, that may be up to 5 now. But you remind yourself of the good in your life. You remind yourself that you are a gifted person. You remind yourself that you have been blessed. And it's the antidote to covetousness. Because if I have enough, if I am enough, if I believe that God has given me enough, I don't need to look across the driveway. I don't need to look into somebody else's closet. I don't have to have more, different, or better to make me someone. Because God has made me. And that ought to be enough.